I've got all kinds of fucking problems. I pray for them all the time, years, some of these problems. And I'm not saying I have more problems or less problems than anybody else. They're just problems, you know, and I pray about them. A lot of them don't get answered. And then I think about it and I'm like, what does that mean? Like, it's Monday morning. I'm anxious. I'm a business owner. I'm a family guy. I got all kinds of problems and anxieties. And so what is it when it says, don't worry about your problems, hand them over to me. I'll take care of them. Like, I've been praying for years for you to take care of some of these problems, and they're all, not all of them, but a lot of them are still here. So what does that mean? Like, I can't just go, hey, I got all this shit coming up and there are problems and things that I'm stressed about, but I'm just not going to fucking do any of it because you said you're going to handle it.
Right.
That's not going to work out well for me.
Right.
You know, and so I don't even know what that means. Just hand over your problems. Here you go.
I think
Here they are.
Yeah, exactly. I think one way that it could be looked at, and maybe this is a unique way of framing it, but I think part of that calling that God says, you know, come to me because my yoke is easy and my burden is light, is an invitation to be transparent with God in those things. Psalm 23, pretty famous psalm. The Lord is my shepherd. Yahweh is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. One chapter over, Psalm 22, starts very different. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from me, from my salvation and the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I call by day, but you do not answer, and by night, and I have no rest. You know what I find really interesting about the God of the Bible is the God of the Bible, who calls us to come to him, sees both the person who says, Yahweh is my shepherd, I shall not want, and the person who says, my God, why have you forsaken me, as equally valid forms of worship. In that 1/3 of the book of Psalms is what is sometimes referred to as the lament or the complaint Psalms. And that God wants us to come to him. He wants us to be transparent with him. He wants us to be like David, who says, I don't get it. I'm struggling. I'm lost. I don't feel you. I feel like you're far away. I feel like I'm forsaken. And that aspect, I think, of God calling us to cast our burdens on him, part of that is an acknowledgement of God realizing that this world is hard, that our burdens aren't meaningless. You know, some Eastern philosophies like Buddhism and Taoism and Shintoism, you read some of these writings and the way that they talk about struggle and pain and suffering is sometimes very dismissive, in that it's like, well, just stop desiring things. Just stop. You know, you're attached to this world because you have this desire. So cast off all desires. You know, easier said than done, right? You know, ironically, they desire to do that, to cast off all the desires. But I think what we see within the just honesty of the text of the Bible is that you see that God who's compassionate, that God who understands, that God who says, you know, you can come to me and you can be honest with me about what's going on. You don't have to sugarcoat your problems. You don't have to pretend that you're holier than you really are. You don't have to pretend that things are going well or that things are easy, because listen, I get it. You know, I walked the dusty streets of first century Galilee and my feet ached and my friends abandoned me. My family members died and I was betrayed and I was murdered. And I think part of God calling us to come to him is less of a cure-all. You know, all of a sudden, all your problems are going to be fixed. That's not realistic. We know that's not going to happen. There's a future tense of the fact that God says, you know, I'm going to make all things new. But he also says this world is going to be hard. And this world is going to be full of pain and struggle, but I've overcome the world. And so all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me, Jesus says. And as part of that, I think the calling is less of Jesus is just a fixer who's going to solve all our problems. Jesus isn't a genie. But the relational component is that God wants us to come to him. He wants us to be honest. He wants us to be transparent because he can understand those things. And the reassurance in that is that it's not a God that just creates and sets the dials in motion and then steps back and says, well, I hope everything works out. Let's see how all these little people can figure themselves out, and I hope it works out. No, God desires our good, but that good doesn't necessarily mean that everything is going to work perfectly in this world. Look at the apostles. Mm-hmm. Look at Jesus himself. All of the apostles, after coming to the realization that their rabbi rose from the dead and that the claims that he made about himself were true, saw that proclamation and the new life that was a possibility for others as something worth suffering and dying for. And although we can't be sure of all the martyrdom stories, that they're rock solid about all the apostles, we know that they at minimum suffered pain and persecution for that. And they desired that. Not that they were going out to get hurt, but they understood that, the God who loves us is worth knowing personally, because the God who loves us cares about us when we are in those seasons of, my God, why have you forsaken me? And in the seasons of, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want.
All right.